Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever noticed that the moment you stop chasing something, it somehow finds its way to you? It's an odd truth, but one that governs much of our lives, especially in relationships. When you pour all your energy into someone, trying to keep them close, trying to be noticed, trying to be loved, you unknowingly push them away. But when you release that need, when you detach, when you stop waiting, something incredible happens. The very person who once took you for granted starts to feel your absence. They begin to wonder, to question, to chase. Why? Because energy follows attention. The more you invest in someone who isn't reciprocating, the more they withdraw. But the moment you redirect that energy toward yourself, toward your growth, your happiness, your peace, the balance shifts. It is not about playing games. It is about understanding that true love, true attraction, and true fulfillment come from within. The world is drawn to those who are whole, not those who are searching for completion in another. When you hold on to something too tightly, you create resistance. Imagine holding sand in your fist. Gripping it with force only causes it to slip through your fingers. The same principle applies to human relationships. When you chase, beg, or try to control the presence of another person in your life, you create an invisible pressure that pushes them away. People by nature crave freedom. They're drawn to what feels effortless and repelled by what feels forced. The paradox of attraction is that the less you need someone, the more they feel the urge to be around you. When you detach, you shift your focus inward rather than outward. Instead of constantly thinking about how to keep someone close, you begin to focus on your own energy, your own happiness, and your own growth. This shift is powerful because it changes the dynamic between you and the other person. Suddenly they sense a difference in you. The constant validation you once sought is no longer there, and this absence creates a void. People do not always appreciate what is freely given, but they quickly notice when it is withdrawn. Detachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean you stop caring about the person or the relationship. Instead, it means you stop clinging to an outcome, you stop trying to force a connection, and you stop making someone else's actions dictate your emotions. When you release attachment, you regain control over your own peace. You no longer act out of fear of losing someone, fear of being alone, fear of being unwanted. You act from a place of self-assurance, where your happiness is not conditional upon another person's presence. The moment you detach, a powerful transformation happens. You stop radiating the energy of desperation, and desperation is repellent. Instead, you exude self-confidence and a quiet assurance that you are enough, whether or not someone else chooses to stay. This shift is magnetic. The same person who once overlooked you suddenly starts to wonder why you no longer seek their attention. They begin to feel drawn to the space you have created because human nature is wired to value what seems scarce. When someone senses that your world no longer revolves around them, they start wanting to be a part of it again. This is not a trick or a manipulation. It is a truth about energy. People mirror what they perceive. When they see you as needy or overly available, they assume you will always be there and they take it for granted. But when they see that you are content, thriving, and unbothered by their absence, their perception changes. You are no longer the one chasing, you are the one being pursued. This shift in energy alters the dynamic completely. The less you try to hold on, the more they feel compelled to return. Whatever you focus on, you give power to. The mind is a fertile ground where whatever you plant, be it worry, love, fear, or confidence, begins to grow. This is why when you constantly think about someone, analyze their actions, and seek their validation, you unknowingly send them an enormous amount of energy. They may not be consciously aware of it, but on a subtle level they feel it. When you fixate on another person, your emotional and mental energy flows toward them, strengthening their influence over you, while simultaneously diminishing your own sense of self. This is why people who are deeply attached to someone often feel drained. It is not just about time spent together, it is about where your energy is going. If your thoughts are consumed by another person, if your emotions fluctuate based on their actions, then your energy is no longer centered within you. Instead, it is directed outward, constantly feeding into someone else's presence while leaving you feeling empty. When this happens, you lose your inner balance, and the more you lose yourself, the less attractive you become. Attraction is not just about physical appearance or words spoken, it is about the energy you radiate. When you pour all your attention into someone, you subtly communicate that your happiness depends on them, and this creates an imbalance in the dynamic. People are drawn to those who are centered within themselves. When your energy is scattered, when your thoughts are always fixated on another person, they sense it. It is a natural human tendency to be more interested in things that seem just out of reach. But when you are constantly available, constantly attentive, and constantly seeking their presence, there is no space for them to feel your absence. It is in absence that appreciation grows. When you pull back your attention and redirect it toward yourself, something shifts. You reclaim your power. Instead of investing all your energy into wondering about someone else's thoughts, actions, and emotions, you invest in yourself. This shift is not just psychological, it is energetic. When you stop directing all your focus toward another person, you become more magnetic. You begin to glow differently, move differently, and think differently. Instead of seeking, you start attracting. Instead of waiting, you start living. People notice when energy is withdrawn, and the moment they sense that they are no longer the center of your attention, they begin to wonder why. This curiosity creates an energetic pull. They start thinking about you more, even if they do not understand why. They begin to feel your absence in a way they never did before. It is not about manipulation. It is about understanding how energy works. If you have ever found yourself unable to stop thinking about someone who pulled away, it is because they withdrew their energy and your mind naturally followed. The same principle applies in reverse. When you reclaim your energy and focus it on your own growth, your own peace, and your own happiness, you shift the dynamic. You are no longer pouring yourself into someone who may not even notice your efforts. Instead, you are redirecting all that energy inward, and in doing so, you create a sense of value. When your energy is no longer freely given away, people start to recognize its worth. They begin to crave the presence they once took for granted. They begin to feel the weight of your absence, not because you forced them to, but because energy always follows attention. And the moment your attention shifts, so does their perception of you. When a person relies on external validation to feel worthy, they unknowingly place their happiness and self-esteem in the hands of others. This is a fragile way to live because people's opinions are constantly shifting, their attention is fleeting, and their approval is never guaranteed. A life built on seeking validation from the outside world is a life of uncertainty, where every compliment brings a temporary high and every criticism feels like a devastating blow. It is an exhausting cycle, one that keeps people trapped in a state of self-doubt, always looking outward for reassurance instead of looking inward for true confidence. Real self-worth does not come from how others see you, it comes from how you see yourself. If your sense of value is dependent on whether someone compliments you, notices you, or chooses you, then you will always be at the mercy of their choices. The moment they withdraw their attention, you will feel empty. The moment they fail to acknowledge you, you will question your own worth. But when your self-worth is built from within, external opinions lose their power over you. You do not need constant reassurance because you already know your value. You do not need to be chosen by someone else to feel complete because you have already chosen yourself. Yeah. When people seek validation from others, they unknowingly give away their power. They start molding themselves into what they think others will like, rather than embracing who they truly are. They adjust their behavior, suppress their true thoughts, and chase approval in the hope of being accepted. But the truth is, the more you seek validation, the more you appear as someone who needs it. And paradoxically, people are often drawn to those who do not seek their approval at all. Confidence is attractive not because it is loud or boastful, but because it is self-sufficient. When someone carries themselves with a quiet sense of assurance, when they do not beg for attention or force themselves into spaces where they are not valued, they naturally command respect. People who have strong self-worth do not fear rejection because they do not see it as a reflection of their value. They understand that someone else's inability to recognize their worth does not diminish it. They do not feel the need to constantly prove themselves because they know that their existence, their efforts, and their presence are enough. They do not need to be the loudest in the room or the most noticed because their worth is not measured by how many people acknowledge them. When someone no longer craves external validation, they become unshakable. They move through life with a different energy, one that is rooted in self-respect rather than desperation for approval. They do not chase love, friendships, or opportunities that require them to diminish themselves. Instead, they attract people who appreciate them for who they truly are, not for who they try to be. And when others see that they are not desperate for validation, it makes them want to give it even more. The paradox is that the less you need approval, the more freely it comes. This is why those who prioritize self-worth over external validation are often the ones who experience the most fulfilling connections. They do not enter relationships from a place of need, but from a place of abundance. They do not cling to others out of fear of being alone because they are already at peace with themselves. And in that peace, they become magnetic. Not because they are trying to be, but because true confidence, the kind that does not demand attention, is impossible to ignore. When people seek happiness outside themselves, they enter a cycle of endless chasing. They believe that fulfillment lies in achievements, relationships, wealth, or recognition, but every time they reach a milestone, the satisfaction is fleeting. The mind quickly shifts to the next goal, the next desire, the next thing that will supposedly bring lasting happiness. This cycle creates a restless existence where peace is always one step ahead, just out of reach. The truth is, no external accomplishment or relationship can provide true fulfillment, because fulfillment is not something to be found, it is something to be cultivated from within. Inner fulfillment is the state of being complete within oneself, independent of external circumstances. It is a deep sense of contentment that does not waver with temporary successes or failures. When a person is truly fulfilled from within, they do not rely on others to make them feel whole. They do not seek validation, they do not chase love out of loneliness, and they do not base their happiness on things they cannot control. Instead, they find joy in simply being. They experience life fully, without constantly searching for the next source of happiness. Most people believe that happiness will come once they achieve something significant, once they find the right partner, secure the right job, or reach a certain level of success. But those who have acquired all these things often find that the sense of fulfillment they expected does not last. This is because external achievements are temporary, and relying on them for happiness makes happiness fragile. The moment something is lost, taken away, or no longer provides excitement, discontent creeps back in. This is why even the most successful individuals sometimes feel empty despite having everything they once desired. Fulfillment that depends on external factors will always be unstable. When a person learns to generate fulfillment from within, everything changes. They are no longer controlled by the ups and downs of life. They do not cling to people in an attempt to fill an internal void, nor do they break down when things do not go as planned. Instead, they navigate life with a sense of inner peace that cannot be disturbed. They understand that joy is not something to be found, but something to be created. Whether they are alone or surrounded by people, whether they are achieving great things or simply sitting in stillness, they remain at ease because their fulfillment is not conditional. This inner state of fulfillment radiates outward and affects everything in a person's life. When they are not desperate for love, they attract it effortlessly. When they do not seek validation, they are naturally respected. When they do not chase happiness in material things, they find joy in even the simplest moments. They stop waiting for life to give them a reason to be happy and instead recognize that the ability to feel complete has always been within them. The more a person relies on external sources for happiness, the more power they give away. They place their emotional well-being in the hands of others, allowing circumstances to dictate how they feel. But the moment they turn inward, the moment they realize that true fulfillment has nothing to do with what they gain and everything to do with their inner state, they become unshakable. They no longer move through life grasping at temporary pleasures, but instead experience a constant, unwavering sense of peace. When this happens, they are no longer seekers of happiness, they become the source of it. Silence has a power that words often fail to convey. In a world where people feel the need to constantly express themselves, prove their worth and explain their emotions, silence stands out as something rare and profound. It is a language of its own, one that carries weight without the need for sound. It is in silence that people truly listen, not just to others but to themselves. When words stop, awareness deepens, and everything that was once overlooked comes into focus. When someone withdraws their words, it creates space. Space for reflection, space for realization, and space for understanding. This is why silence can be more impactful than arguing, pleading, or trying to prove a point. When a person stops explaining, defending, or justifying themselves, their absence is felt more than their words ever could be. Others begin to notice what was once taken for granted. They start to wonder, to question, and to feel the void left behind. Silence has the ability to shift the balance in relationships. When one person is constantly seeking attention, validation, or a response, the other person holds the power. But the moment silence enters the equation, the energy shifts. The one who was once giving all their effort, all their words, and all their emotions suddenly stops. The absence of their presence, their voice, and their reactions becomes louder than anything they could have said. This is when people start to listen, not because they were forced to, but because silence leaves them with no choice. It is human nature to notice what is missing. When something or someone is always present, their presence is often taken for granted. But when they fall silent, when they step back, when they no longer give their energy freely, their absence speaks volumes. It forces others to reflect, to question, and to acknowledge what was once overlooked. Words can be dismissed, argued against, or ignored, but silence lingers. It creates an atmosphere that demands attention without force. In moments of conflict, silence can be more powerful than any argument. Words often escalate tension, adding fuel to emotions that are already burning. But silence can diffuse anger, forcing the other person to confront their own thoughts instead of reacting to yours. When you stop engaging in unnecessary battles, you take away the power of those trying to provoke you. Silence becomes a shield, a form of strength that refuses to be dragged into negativity. It communicates confidence, self-control, and an understanding that not every situation requires a response. Beyond relationships and conflict, silence is also a gateway to self-awareness. People are often afraid of silence because it forces them to sit with their own thoughts. In a world filled with distractions, noise, and endless conversations, Silence feels unfamiliar, but it is in silence that the mind settles, that clarity emerges, and that true wisdom is found. When a person embraces silence, they no longer feel the need to explain themselves to everyone, to be heard at all times, or to constantly seek reassurance from the outside world. They become comfortable with their own presence, and in doing so they command more respect than words ever could. Those who understand the power of silence use it wisely. They do not waste words on those who refuse to listen. They do not seek validation from those who cannot see their worth. Instead, they let their absence speak for them. Their lack of response create curiosity, and their silence create impact. Whether in relationships, conflicts, or personal growth, silence has a way of revealing truth that words often fail to express. When people feel free, they open up, they trust, and they connect in ways that are natural and unforced. The need for control in relationships, whether through expectations, demands, or constant reassurance, often creates resistance rather than closeness. But when freedom is present, when a person feels that they are not being restricted, judged, or pressured, they are drawn closer not because they have to be, but because they choose to be. Real connection does not come from possession, comes from allowing someone to be fully themselves without fear of losing them. Many people believe that holding on tightly to someone will keep them close. They think that setting rules, seeking constant validation, or demanding attention will create a stronger bond. But the opposite is true. The more control that is exerted, the more resistance is created. Humans have an innate need for independence, and when they feel that their freedom is being compromised, their natural instinct is to pull away. This is why relationships built on possessiveness often feel suffocating. When someone feels like they have no space to breathe, they start longing for an escape. But when a person knows that they are free to be themselves, when they feel no pressure to act a certain way, when they do not fear judgment or unrealistic expectations, they feel safe. And in that safety, connection grows. The strongest relationships, whether friendships, romantic partnerships, or even family bonds, are not built on control. They are built on the freedom to be authentic. A person who is given the space to be themselves will naturally be drawn toward the one who gives them that freedom. Freedom does not mean indifference. It does not mean letting go of care, love, or effort. It means allowing a person to come to you by choice rather than by obligation. It means trusting that if a connection is real, it does not need to be forced. When someone knows they have the freedom to leave, yet they choose to stay, their presence carries more meaning. It is not there out of guilt, fear, or pressure. It is there because they genuinely want to be. This concept applies to all areas of life. People who are constantly monitored and micromanaged at work feel drained and uninspired, whereas those who are given the freedom to think and act independently thrive. Friendships that are based on unrealistic expectations often become exhausting, while those built on acceptance feel effortless. The same is true in romantic relationships. Love that allows space and individuality lasts, while love that suffocates eventually collapses under the weight of control. The paradox of freedom is that the less it is restricted, the more connection it creates. When people feel free, they do not feel the need to escape. They do not feel trapped or burdened by someone else's expectations. Instead, they feel drawn toward the people who respect their space, their choices, and their individuality. The moment a person realizes that they are not being held captive by someone else's needs, they begin to appreciate the relationship even more. This is why people often long for what they feel they cannot have, yet take for granted what is always available. The illusion of scarcity creates desire, while the presence of freedom fosters genuine appreciation. When a person does not feel forced to stay, their decision to remain carries true value. Their presence is no longer a result of pressure but of genuine connection. Freedom creates an environment where people are not afraid to express themselves fully. They do not have to filter their thoughts, hide their feelings, or conform to someone else's expectations. They know they are accepted as they are, and that acceptance builds a deep sense of trust. Trust is not created through control. It is created through the freedom to be vulnerable without fear. When someone knows they can be their true self without losing the relationship, they open up in ways they never would under pressure. It is in this space of freedom that real love, real connection, and real respect thrive. When someone is allowed to be themselves without restriction, they do not run away, they come closer, not because they have to, not because they are forced to, but because they truly want to. People spend their entire life searching for happiness in the world around them. They chase after success, relationships, wealth, recognition, and experiences, believing that once they attain these things, they will finally be happy. But happiness is not something that exists outside of a person. It is something that is cultivated from within. No external achievement, no person, and no material possession can create lasting happiness if it does not already exist internally. This is why so many people who appear to have it all still feel empty, while others who live simple lives radiate joy. The difference is not in what they possess, but in where they look for fulfillment. Happiness that depends on external circumstances is fragile. It is at the mercy of events, people's opinions, and situations beyond one's control. If happiness is tied to wealth, what happens when money is lost? If it is tied to validation, what happens when people stop giving it? If it is tied to relationships, what happens when they change or end? A person whose happiness is dependent on the external world will always live in fear of losing what brings them joy, fear of things not going as planned, fear of not being enough. This fear creates an endless cycle of chasing, always looking for the next thing to fill the void, never realizing that the search itself is the problem. Real happiness is not about what happens outside, but about what happens inside. It is a state of being that is not dictated by circumstances, but by one's inner world. This is why two people can experience the same situation and feel completely different emotions. One may feel frustrated and defeated, while the other remains calm and unaffected. The difference is not in the situation itself, but in the way each person processes and experiences it. A person who has found happiness within themselves does not require life to be perfect in order to feel content. They do not need everything to go their way to feel at peace. Their happiness is not a reaction to the outside world. It is a choice they make from within. Many people believe that happiness comes after success, but in reality, success often follows happiness. When a person is internally fulfilled, they approach life with a different energy, one of confidence, gratitude, and openness. They do not chase success out of desperation but pursue their goals with a sense of joy and purpose. And because they are not looking for achievements to complete them, they are able to enjoy the journey rather than constantly worrying about the destination. This makes them more creative, more resilient, and ultimately more successful. Happiness is a habit, not a reward. It is built through small daily choices. Choosing gratitude over complaint, presence over distraction, and self-acceptance over self-criticism. A person who has learned to cultivate happiness within does not need perfect conditions to feel at peace. They do not wait for life to be ideal before they allow themselves to be happy. Instead, they recognize that joy is found in the present moment, in appreciating what is already here rather than longing for what is missing. Many people postpone happiness, telling themselves they will be happy when they get a better job, when they find the right partner, when they reach a certain level of success. But when never truly comes, because the mind always moves the goalpost. The moment one desire is fulfilled, a new one takes its place. This is why even those who achieve great things often feel unsatisfied. They have spent so much time looking for happiness in the future that they have forgotten how to experience it in the present. A person who understands that happiness comes from within is free. They are no longer controlled by the ups and downs of life, by what others say or do, or by circumstances that are outside their control. They become the source of their own joy, which means that no one can take it away from them. They do not seek happiness in external things because they have already found it where it has always been, inside themselves. True happiness, real connection, and deep fulfillment are not found in the external world but cultivated from within. The more a person seeks validation, control, or external sources of joy, the more they remain trapped in a cycle of chasing without ever feeling truly satisfied. When they learn to detach from the need for approval, embrace silence, value their self-worth, and allow freedom in relationships, they create space for genuine connection, unshakable peace, and lasting happiness. Silence, inner fulfillment, and self-reliance speak louder than words or actions ever could. The moment one stops looking outside for happiness and instead nurtures it from within, they no longer need to chase, to prove, or to hold on tightly. They become the source of their own joy, and in doing so, they naturally attract everything they once sought. Happiness is not a destination. It is a state of being, and once it is found within, it flows effortlessly into every aspect of life.